Hello, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My Ed Tech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful day. And wherever it is you're joining us from around the world, thank you, as always, for making us part of your day. We appreciate all the likes, the shares, the follows. Thank you so much to all our new YouTube subscribers, all our followers, and everyone that engages with our content. We really appreciate it. As you know, we do what we do for you to bring you some amazing conversations and amazing guests like the one that we have today. And I am so excited to catch up with my great friend, Bonnie Nieves, who's joining us. And Bonnie, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. How are you? I'm so happy to be talking with you today. It's been way too long.
Well, I'm fantastic too. I'm excited. First of all, also, thank you so much for reaching out. And guys, I always say, whenever you've been a guest on the show, you always have an open invite. And I just loved that you reached out to me so we can definitely catch up because I know we were just talking right now pre chat. And I was like, oh my gosh, Bonnie, the last time that you were on the show was episode 164, January 7th, 2023. So, it's been a hot minute, like they say, but it hasn't felt like it's been that long, but I'm definitely glad to be catching up with you, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. Isn't that wild how fast 2 years can just go by? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. Life is
absolutely. That's for sure. But
short.
again, I'm glad that you're here and we definitely have a lot to catch up on. So let's go ahead and dive in. And before we get started with the meat of the conversation, there may be some listeners out there who may not be familiar with your work yet and haven't connected with you yet. But after today's show, I'm sure that you will definitely have a lot more new followers. So Bonnie, before we dive in, can you give us a little brief introduction and what your context is in the education space?
Yeah, for sure. I've been a science teacher for 15 years. Found that EdTech makes my life so much easier. I'm one of those people who, when I find a tool that I like, I go straight to the source. I contact the developers, the ambassadors, all those folks, get really involved in that kind of stuff and find the best ways to use it for my student, and then love social media. So I get on social media and talk to people about ways that I've used tech and make suggestions, but then take suggestions from other people as well. And let's see, I've got a newsletter that I put out on LinkedIn every week. And just like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna ramble, but I wrote a book for Edge Match years ago called Be Awesome on Purpose. And the purpose of writing the book was to get the thoughts in my head out. And now I'm finding my weekly newsletter is much the same, where I just reflect on the things that I've done over the last week. And it really is helpful to me to put it out to people, and I have found that it's resonating with people. I get a lot of DMs and things. I'm up to week 56, which means it's been over a year, so, that means it must be a pretty good habit. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it, really, I
Absolutely. And you
guess.
know what? That
Yeah.
newsletter is definitely gold and we'll definitely make sure that we link it all in our show notes because I know that you pack so much in there and talk about getting the ideas out of your head and sharing them with educators and building community not only with
Mm.
the educators I should say that do read your newsletter, but it's also great to read your newsletter letter and see the community that you build within your students as well. And just to hear about their progress, hear how they're learning, hear how they're enthusiastic about trying new things. Now, speaking of trying new things, I know the last time that you were here, you were doing high school science.
Mhm.
Now, I know that there was a change. So tell us a little bit about that change and where it is that you
Yes.
landed now.
Oh, it's so exciting. So I've been teaching high level biotechnology and anatomy and physiology to juniors and seniors for years. And this year I decided it was time for a switch. So I'm teaching general science to sixth graders, which is the most fun I've had in the classroom in a long time. And I always have fun. I'm always interacting with students and we're finding joy everywhere we are. But these sixth graders exude joy, right? They come into the classroom with so much ambition, so much curiosity, and it really has been good for my heart to work with students at this level. Yeah.
That is great. Oh my gosh, that comment right there, that last
Yeah.
one, it really hits because like we were talking a little bit pre-chat. I mean, I did
Mhm.
6th grade for a couple of years also and then moved down to 5th and I started as a high school teacher also. I did high school algebra, but then I moved down to elementary and then like I mentioned, he did 6th grade and then moved down to 5th. But there was just something about elementary that I had so much fun, and the students at that age, they really do come in with a lot of curiosity, a lot of energy, and it's
Mhm.
almost like I loved it because I was able as a teacher, I was able to take risks, and they were right there right along with me, and we were all
Mhm.
taking that risk as far as introducing new tech or doing things differently, doing presentations in a different way. And one of the big things that I do want to talk about before we get into all the other wonderful stuff, too, hitting more your newsletter and some of the things that are upcoming in this next year in January that you'll be presenting, but, you know, amplifying student voices, when they come in, giving them a voice, giving them an opportunity to share in a safe space in a way that is just again something for me it's so powerful because just to
Mhm.
get their thought process, see the way they think either visually or if they give it to you in a presentation like just speaking it's so powerful. So tell me a little bit about just some of those transitions or maybe some of the new things that you're able to do and how you're able to help your students to develop that passion like you did in high school as well.
Yeah, so the thing that I'm doing now that I'm excited about with these sixth graders is the way we introduce topics and talk about them together and the way that the students are doing the work. So, for example, we're learning about weather right now, and we did not an experiment, but an activity with a soda bottle with soap on the rim. So when you put it in cold water, the soap decreases and goes down into the bottle. But then when you put it in warm water, it forms a bubble at the top. So like this is the first time students have seen a bubble form by itself in that type of way. Super excited. The energy levels through the roof. So I had them talk through one another to put their ideas on a board and make it into a giant poster. So we've got everyone's ideas on a poster. I did no talking at all, but they're explaining what's happening to the molecules in the air as that's happening. So we're just markers, marking it up, making mistakes, scratching them off, starting over. Like sixth graders actually discussing, like, "Are you sure you want that there? Can we have a second opinion?" I hate to say it's the cutest thing, but it's the cutest thing because these kids are half the age of the kids I'm used to working with. So they're really collaborating and learning how to value one another's voices, but also to uh, be confident enough to speak up even when they're not sure they're right? Just to throw an idea out there. So that's been an important thing to do. An interesting thing is that I have been a technology first person for a long time. And these students are just now getting their Chromebooks. So they just got them at the start of the school year. And they're not they're not trying to use technology for everything yet. So it's going to be really interesting to take them from drawing that thing on the board and collaborating to doing something like collaborative Google Slides and things like that. But for right now, I really just want to work on more of the conversational in person stuff before we dig into layering the tech on top of it. So, yeah, that's another interesting piece of this grade level for me.
Yeah, and that's really cool to kind of see, but at the same time, like you said, just working hands on, and then also now the transfer of that skill onto the Chromebook and onto some platforms now where they could visualize in a digital way their learning as well. And of course, building portfolios or you have evidence of learning. And that was one of my favorite things to do with the students when they would work on something hands on. Because I did teach science too, they absolutely love the hands on aspect of it. And
Mhm,
they had their little journals, but then, transferring that into a digital learning artifact, and then just to
mhm,
have something to be able to share not only with parents, but also to share, within our learning community there at the school. And then, of course, they get to keep it and have it and build on that for the next year and so on. That's something that is great and wonderful. So and that's really exciting. And I'm just so glad that they're just so pumped about that and just amplifying, like you said, their voices, they're being heard. And one of the things that I love that you mentioned is you absolutely haven't done or during that activity maybe very minimal talking because they took ownership and they were
mhm.
engaged. So that's something that I know you mentioned in your most recent newsletter too, as far as student engagement and ownership. So I want to ask you, and I know that we're well into the year, middle of the year, and so on, but for any teachers that are out there that are still just maybe feel a little bit of a struggle with that aspect as far as kind of letting go a little bit and having the students be engaged and just taking ownership. What are some of the things that you do to help them blossom in that aspect?
The first there are a couple of first steps, right? Depending on what you're most comfortable with. So as far as conversations, when you want students to share their ideas openly in the class, but they're not comfortable with being incorrect or they're not sure they're correct, start with the groups. So even a think, pair, share, and have the kids talk to each other and then choose their best idea to share with the class, right? Or the thing they're most confident about with the class. That way, that takes the pressure off of being called on or having to offer to raise their hand. If you tell them right up front, you're going to think, pair, share, and you're going to come up with one idea to share with the class. And then the pair is more confident doing it together than they would be independently. The only thing that I've had even just this last week that is a little hiccup with that is when you have 8 pairs of students and you come around to like the sixth pair and they say, well, I was going to share something, but group number two did that. And that's the perfect time to say, see, now we're reaching a consensus. If more than one person says it, then there must be some importance to that. So please share why you think that's important, right? We're always adding to instead of replacing other people's opinions or letting our opinions being replaced by other people's. And for things like written work, giving students choices about which option they want to do. Like something as simple as, would you like to do this in a Google Doc or would you like to do this in a Google Slides? And giving them options, letting them become familiar with options before we give them complete ownership of what they're doing. And it it really becomes less complicated the more you do it because you can see where your kids are going with it. And because they're working not completely independently, but more independently than before, it gives you more time to spend talking to the kids about what they're doing, why they made those decisions, and then you can start thinking about the tools that you have in your toolbox that you can offer as an additional option next time.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And, it's like you said, I think the importance of just giving options and whatever the student feels most comfortable with and with that media to present. And that I can attest to being so powerful, especially, again, in my experience too, as well, being able to have a student, an emergent bilingual student who may not feel comfortable speaking or presenting, but being able to hand them maybe a Chromebook or just a piece of butcher paper where they can draw and show me visually, that they're mastering content. Sometimes, the one of the students that I'll always remember, I mean, she spoke loudly through her drawings and through her
Mm,
presentations that she would do. That although she didn't verbally speak because she was very shy and she was very self conscious, the content, mastery was there because of her learning artifacts that she submitted, but later as the year progressed, her language acquisition was just wonderful. She was able to exit from our bilingual program, and she just went on to be very successful, and that's one thing that I love, and that's something that I wanted to ask you too about and I know you mentioned it a little bit in your newsletter too, as far as giving options, but you talked a little bit about podcasting too, so I'm just curious about
oh,
that. Tell me a little bit about the podcasting that you're doing.
oh my gosh. So our podcast, it was started by students. And it was because it was one of those options, right? Would you rather do this or would you rather do that? Some chose podcast. And they had to give it a name, they have to give it cover art, and then they have to do episode art for every one. So now it helps because it brings in the students that would rather communicate visually. There are the students that can write the script or write the question prompts, and then there are the students that are comfortable getting in front of the camera or the mic and saying, recording the episode. So our podcast is on Spotify and it's called I Love Your Guts. It's I just love it because that's me, that's them picking up my vibe, right? Like where we are trying to take everything negative and find some positivity in it. So it's I love your guts and they are in complete control of the content. So the only thing I do is record uh like a 5 or 10 second introduction at the beginning, and then I just put the mostly unedited content out on Spotify. One thing that's incredibly interesting is that there was one student that recorded his own podcast, and his voice was just so good for audio, and he was so comfortable. And when I asked him if he ever considered being a host of a podcast, he hadn't. So I gave him a mic and had him go around interviewing people around the school. So there's a chapter of the podcast, which is all this kid doing interviews of students and giving them an opportunity to talk about their work in other classes. And it turned out that he really liked it. He went off to college, and one of the things that he's considering is broadcasting. So
I
you just
love
never know until you ask.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely wonderful. And that's something that I love too. I know that for a lot of students, I think, and even myself, I think if I were to go back in time, when my formative years in elementary or high school, because I just had such a fear of writing. And I don't know if it was just maybe I just didn't have a good experience in the writing aspect. And also being an English language learner, like I didn't learn English until I was in second grade. And so I think it was just, just that trauma or something, but
Mhm.
voicing, I could definitely do. So I just love the fact that, the students feel comfortable, that although they may not feel comfortable with the writing aspect, or maybe just even being able to get their ideas out, like you mentioned earlier in the show with the newsletter, you're able to get your ideas out. Well, they're able to get their ideas out through that podcast that later can transfer or translate into just written text, into a blog, and so on. So it's still great because you can hit on so many wonderful modalities there and ways of learning, and all those skills are completely transferable. And I think I absolutely love that. So that is wonderful that they get to document their podcast. And is it all
Mhm.
students that get to participate, in the class? How do you work it out to where each student gets an opportunity, or is it only specific students that really want to share their learning through the podcast? How does that work in your classroom? Hey, educators, ready for a game changer? I've partnered up with Goose Chase to revolutionize learning through play. This amazing platform helps students grasp key concepts, engage in epic challenges, and feel the thrill of discovery. From classroom scavenger hunts to district wide adventures, Goose Chase turns education into an unforgettable journey. Join the movement that's making learning fun again. Visit www.myedtech.life/myedtech10 and use code myedtech10 for 10% off any license purchase, whether it's individual, school, or district. Click the link in the show description and let's make education exciting together with Goose Chase.
Oh no, it's open to anyone who'd like to try it.
Love
And
it.
that's evident in the podcast because they're proud of the work. They listen to it before it goes out, before I hit publish, and they're they're proud of the work that's being put out. And there's all different levels of work, but they're they're happy to have the opportunity to share it. And it's really important to amplify student voices whenever you have an opportunity, which is something I learned years ago from friends on Twitter back in the OG Twitter days when people used to say, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just let it go. Let that go. That's only going to stop you from progress. Just it's okay if it's not perfect. Someday you'll look at it and you'll giggle and you'll see how far you've come. So that's what I tell the kids, and that's what we push out. So it's open to any student who wants to give it a try.
I love it. That is
Yeah.
wonderful. And like you said too, it also helps the students understand that even though it may not be quite polished, the content that you're putting out there is still something that's valuable. And like you said, that's something that you still work on, because I can assure you, looking back on, year one, episode one of this
Mhm.
podcast, and even going back to episode 164 when you were on back in 2023 till now, I mean, a lot has changed. But for the
Mhm.
part is just keeping that essence of just still being imperfect, but it's all about the content and the conversation and so
Mhm.
on. But it's just wonderful you putting yourself out there, and I think that's great. And again, going back to the amplifying student voices, I think maybe that's why I I loved doing that with my students, because I know I struggled with maybe just the written word, but being able to speak
Mhm.
it and share my thought process really was very easy. And to this day, that's why I just absolutely love amplifying educator voices too as well. So that's the great thing about it. So thank you so much for sharing that. And we'll definitely be linking that in the show notes as well. So all our audience
Mhm.
members and your new followers too can definitely go and
Yeah.
subscribe there on Spotify. All
Mhm.
right, Bonnie. Well, let's kind of switch gears a little bit, because as we
Okay.
know, January is right around the corner, and January for a lot of people is like conference season is starting.
Mhm.
So I know
Yeah.
that you mentioned a little bit about FETC, and you've got some great things going on there. So tell us a little bit about some of the things that you'll be presenting on, and then we'll kind of dive in a little bit too as far as how that experience has been, as far as you being used in your classroom and so on. So tell us about that wonderful adventure coming up in January.
Oh, yeah, it is gonna be an adventure. So I have to double check. It's 4 sessions, but they're not they're not all traditional sessions, which at first this isn't my first time doing the non-traditional sessions. At first I was uncomfortable with it, but now I really enjoy the things like the round tables and the mega shares. because you get to see so many people and really have the back and forth conversations about how to use things, which is really for some things it's more beneficial to do it that way than a uh, traditional session. And the need to have the fancy Canva slides and all of the gifts and things, because as much as I say it doesn't have to be perfect, just push it out. I have a problem. I like everything to be immaculately polished, especially for FETC, which is upper level stuff. But I have a session that I'm going to do on DFIT and another one on Bloom's taxonomy and beyond, and how to amplify that with AI. Then personalized AI assistance, which I'm hoping is going to be a really hot topic because with all of this AI chat bot news going on, as educators, we need to be incredibly careful about what we're putting in front of students. And not only what we're putting in front of students, but understanding that these are children who don't fully understand what they're getting into. And they could look at an AI chatbot that's outside of the classroom and think it's the same as something we're putting in front of them in the classroom. So, with all of the teachers and all of the educators talking about how important it is to teach AI, let this be our lesson. It is important to teach AI. So I'm hoping that personalized AI assistant conversation will be a really in-depth one. And then I have developed a 3-element formative assessment strategy that I've been doing sessions around New England on, and finding ways, like getting feedback from educators, find ways to improve it. And so I will be rolling that out at FETC. And I believe that's it, a share-a-thon. So I'll be able to see a lot of people and get a lot of feedback from them too about how they feel about this new formative assessment strategy. And of course, I'll be in the expo hall. I'll be at the Smart School booth, which is, I don't know how many times I've said exciting today, but I am elated to be able to spend some time with Matt and Paul and Agatha the at the booth, because they're doing some amazing stuff with math and AI. So
Excellent.
that
Man,
that's the nutshell.
you definitely have your schedule filled up, and I mean, you're definitely gonna be doing a lot of work there, but it's
Mhm,
wonderful to have you be able to share your experiences, and one of the things that you talked about too, especially, nowadays where, we're talking about the AI chatbots and really just the difference that there can be, and I'm glad that you mentioned it too, because I think for myself, just being very cautious where like I don't want students to confuse what they'll use in the classroom to what is outside, because I know I've seen a lot on the news and especially on LinkedIn, and obviously we talked about character AI, in some of those
yeah.
previous episodes too as well, where the students go in and there really aren't any protections, any guardrails per se, as opposed to something that you would see in the education space. So they may take like, hey, well, this would be the same thing. So just to be able to help the students distinguish, and even help parents too as well distinguish the differences between an education platform and a non-education platform, because we definitely don't want our students to get hurt in any way, shape, or form, whether it's emotionally, and definitely we don't want them to get
Mhm,
hurt physically either as well. So that's something that's great, to talk about. So I want to ask you, in your personal practice, and or the experience that you had maybe just in your transition. I know right now you said that they barely getting the Chromebooks and so on. So maybe you haven't
mhm,
hit a couple of platforms or so on yet. But maybe in the previous year while you were still doing high school, what were
mhm.
some of your key ways, when using some of the AI platforms in education?
Oh, so for research, my favorite has always been perplexity. And when I have students do, um, for example, a healthcare project for a biotechnology class where we're trying to tie in sustainable development goals, typically they choose number three because that's the good health and well being. So, um, instead of just accepting that that's the one they'll use because it seems to make the most sense, I ask them to go to perplexity and ask what SDG would be most applicable to a student who's doing a project on, and then whatever their topic is. And then it would give some suggestions. They'd have a short conversation with with the AI, and then they'd ask it to build out an outline for um, a research paper and make suggestions for places to look. And then they would take that and find their own research. Like we still would go to the library, we would still use the Gale databases in conjunction with Perplexity. And as much as I reinforced, like, you're doing 80% of the work, AI is just helping to lighten the load so that it's easier to find your information and make connections between these two things that you're trying to put together. Still, in another class, one of my students completely plagiarized something and grabbed something straight off of Perplexity and then said, "Well, Mrs. Nieves said we could use Perplexity." Like, but not in that way, right? So even as intentional as we are, we still need to do better, right? And it's it really, I mean, it's frustrating. For me, when I heard that, I was so frustrated because I thought, first of all, I don't want my colleague to think that that's the kind of thing that I accept in my classroom. And second of all, I I don't know how I can make it more explicit, but I need to find a way to make it more explicit. So, um, yeah, perplexity has been a real, oh, I won't say game changer, but it has been something that has helped to expedite research by a lot. And even though we have these hiccups with kids not using it appropriately, it's still worth the learning curve to be able to get it right and to provide examples to students of how people in industry are using these tools to help speed their research and development processes, I think is really useful.
No, and I agree with you. I think with also with some of the like you said, the student just completely, taking word for word, that's it just goes back to just needing just more of the digital literacy, digital
Mm.
citizenship and just maybe through the librarian or library resources, just just the way that we learn how to cite when we're doing some of our research for us at, in the university, you have to cite your sources. Same thing here. It's like you mentioned, this is a resource that you have that you can cite, but make sure you cite it appropriately and not just take the whole thing and say, "Hey, here you go. I'm submitting this." But as you know, and like you mentioned, those are some of the things that right now a lot of the students need that help and need those skills and understanding those things. And like you mentioned too, I think maybe that's what some of the bigger frustrations from educators too, as well, is not being like how can I be explicit enough for them to understand? But like you said, it's sometimes it's just that one or two or those three students that but then for the others they understand like right off the bat. It's like, oh, okay, here's my research, here are my articles, here's my outline. Okay, now I need to, make sure that I put this together. And like you said, it's great use case there that they're learning that research aspect. And I mean, I still remember when I was doing research and I was using, I forget what it's called, the microfiche. Oh my God, having to look
Oh my
through film. Yes, that I'm dating myself here. I mean, at
yeah,
my
same,
university, I
same.
mean, it's like going through microfiche here. And now you can pull something up through Perplexity and just say,
Yes.
"Okay, here's my research topic." and then you get your research papers. And oh my gosh, what a game changer. But yeah, definitely, like I
Yeah.
say, gave my age away there a little bit.
Yeah. Oh,
But yeah,
yeah. I've been there too. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but
And oh, just think about how sometimes I think we're cheating kids out of the experience of and probably excluding 90% of the people who are listening and watching right now. But if you're if you're in the library and you're going through that microfiche and you're looking for an article from 40 years ago and you're flipping and flipping and flipping through and then you find it and you're like, "Oh, wow, like that excitement, like you can't match that. AI can't match that because now you can just like create an image of something or search something up really quick. There's the gratification of working hard for something that we still need to make sure kids get, right? That's important.
yes, and then I remember, like you mentioned, you find that article and now it's like, okay, I gotta go pay like the little 10 cents just so I can make that copy of it, and now I have it. I have a physical copy
Yeah.
of that article and those pages, and now I can go and finish my research paper and so on, and again, not that the internet was not around yet, but
Mhm.
it just was a lot easier at that time, for us to do those things, and I mean, it worked out great, but like you said, it's just being able to search and just have those skills and just have that productive struggle. Like you said, it just really pays off. And even now, working through my doctoral research and having to read article through article and finding those things, I mean, it's just, yes, it's a lot of work, but at the end of the day, when you start forming your paper and you're writing and you've got your outline and then you're submitting to your prof and they're giving you like good feedback, it's like, all right, like, it just builds that momentum, which is great, and just being able one of the biggest things for me is just getting feedback. I've always get anxiety, like, when I get my paper back, and I almost wait almost a day just to see it because I don't know, like, either my social battery can't take it or I'll get drained, but I'll open it up and then I'll be like, "Okay, let's take it one step at a time," because that's just the way that I work, but like you said, it's a little struggle there, but now you're able to get your resources a little bit quicker. And of course, just
Mhm.
making sure that we cite things properly. That's wonderful. Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
buddy. But that microfiche, it was back then, it was just awesome.
It was amazing. Yes, it was frustrating at the time, but it's one of those things I'm glad I had to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Bonnie, before we start wrapping up, I know I just want to ask you a little bit more about your presentations, but specifically the one that you were talking about. I'm curious if you can just share a little bit. I know I wanted to talk about the formative assessment piece that,
Oh,
it
yeah.
was the 3-point formative assessment piece that you yourself came up with. And I'm just a little curious if you don't mind sharing that with our audience members, because I know for a lot of listeners too, that might be something beneficial for them. And that could be that little gem for them that can really help out, throughout the rest of the year. So if you can give us a little bit of background on that, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, so of course, research. I love doing the research and I love good educational assessment. So through what I have found, there are three things that I include in every formative assessment. And that is, I think about what is the purpose of this assessment. So is it in order to reteach something? Is it in order just to put students in groups? Or is it for students to lead their own learning? So you put that together with what type of formative assessment do you want to have? So are you just going to be listening to students? Are they going to self evaluate? Or are you just watching? And then the third thing, which is the thing that is a little unconventional and I think is the new thing, is a practical measure for, are they being able to identify with the content, right? How have they been able to put themselves in this position or use this information for themselves? Are the kids engaging with it at the level that you would like them to? or maybe it was the activity that they were doing that just didn't connect. So they they have the purpose, right? They understand the content. They are having conversations, but for some reason there's some engagement. There's something that's limiting the engagement. So I triangulate those things and um, to just try to always inform my instruction and improve my activities and delivery. So the three prongs are the purpose, the type, and the practical measure.
Wow, I love
So
it. And that
yeah.
that that's those are some great action steps for educators to really follow, and just the fact that in these three steps, they're not very difficult, and it just seems like it's just a natural progression from the assessments as we know it, but just to be able to see those things and visually capture them or through an artifact, and like you mentioned, coming back and reassessing and seeing where the students are at. I think that's something that is very powerful, so that is great. And is this something that you worked on? I know you said you do the research on it, but is this something that you worked on while you were working with the high school students, and then how did it come about?
It came about through building my next generation science standards courses and finding these bits and pieces scattered in different parts of literature, but not having it been really put together. So I just finagled with it when I was working with my students in my learning laboratory, and figured out that these are the components that I need to focus on to make instruction move more smoothly, right? Because you can have the best the best slides in the world. You can have wonderful activities for kids, but if they're not identifying with it and they're not engaging with it, then it's it's all for nothing. So you really have to include that piece in your formative assessment as well.
Oh, I love it. So I love it, Bonnie. That is wonderful, and that's great. And for all of you that are going to be at FETC, don't miss out on these presentations because Bonnie is great, and she's definitely going to be bringing the heat. So thank you so much, Bonnie. I really appreciate you being here and just sharing just all these amazing things. But before we jump into the last three questions, I forgot to tell you that I do something a little bit new now too, and I just asked my guests for, just some action steps, for teachers, I should say, little tips that they can implement maybe tomorrow, little takeaways, little gems and nuggets that they can use. So I want to go back to the very beginning where we talked a little bit about amplifying student voices. And I mean, I just love the way that you described your classroom at this moment. It's very low tech. I know that some of that tech implementation will come in now that your students, have received their Chromebooks, and, that'll come in later in, well, probably in this next second half of the year and so on, or maybe this coming week. But I just want to ask you, as far as amplifying student voices, what might be two actionable steps or two action steps that teachers can easily turn around and maybe use within the next 2 days or maybe the next week or so that they, just to get started?
Hmm. So do the think, pair, share. Have students share their ideas with the class, but then make a poster that they can put out into the hallway with everyone's big ideas. Right. So that can be even if you don't have a poster printer available to you, you can have students make slides and then just put all of those slides on one big sheet of paper and put that out into the hallway. It's super fast, low prep. Kids do all the work. You just hit print and let it go. So
Love it.
that's one thing. And another one I say is have students record audio and send it to parents, send it to the administrators, have students listen to one another. And of course, the best thing to do is really just publish it, just put it out. But that takes a little bit of time and a whole lot of confidence. So I would say just record some audio and have the kids listen to one another's audio and then send that out to someone outside of your classroom so people can listen to it.
I love it. And I think there's something to gain too, as well, for the students to, when they know that there's going to be an authentic audience,
Mm,
somebody that's maybe not within their classroom, but just outside, whether, it's maybe community, like you said, other grade levels and administrator and so on. I think that also like really helps the students and pumps them up to know that somebody outside of their four walls there in the classroom that might just say, oh yeah, that was great. And they have their own hype man, but now you get some genuine feedback and authentic feedback from an admin or maybe a previous year teacher or next year's teacher or somebody there at the school or just somebody from the community. I think that's very powerful for them. I love it.
yeah. Yeah, it kind of makes academics like at the level of athletics, right? Because when there's a good basketball, soccer game, good athletic game, kids are getting high fives in the hallway, but we don't have that same thing for academics yet. So this is one way to help accomplish that.
Love it. That is wonderful. All right, Bonnie. Well, now let's go ahead and get into our last three questions. And I know, like I mentioned to you, since the last time you were here, I have changed just one question, but we talked a little bit about it. So I'm a little excited about what you're going to say because I know you're like, well, I'm going to save it till the end. And it's supposed to be, a pretty hot take there, maybe, possibly. I don't know. We'll see.
Maybe.
But here we
Right.
go. Question number one,
Okay.
Bonnie. In the current state of education, what would you say is your current Edu Kryptonite?
Mine is pacing. I always want to do everything all the time. So I need to pull back and do things well, make a decision, and then move on to the next thing and not keep rushing ahead all the time.
All right, there you go. That's a good one. Pacing. All right, question number two. If you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
It would say, be a decent person because we just always need to consider how we we feel about ourselves and how that is projected. So always try to be a decent person first.
Excellent. Great advice. Great billboard. And my last question to you, Bonnie, is if you could trade places with someone for a day, who would it be and why?
Ah, gosh, this is the one. I think it would be Elon Musk because I first I want to see what it's like to be in that environment where I am sure he is completely detached from any sort of normal lifestyle whatsoever. And I just can't imagine what it's like to have these ideas, some of them crazy, some of them not, but to be unrestricted in that way where he's either the richest or one of the richest people in the earth and no one's really going to ever tell him no. So what is that like to have no restraint? He doesn't need to anymore. I I can't imagine not having anyone in the whole universe to answer to. That's why.
There you go. Great, great, great answer, Bonnie. Well, thank you so much, Bonnie. It has been an honor and a pleasure to have you back here. And I just thank you so much for making this episode just extra special. Just again, getting to hang out with you again. It's been almost 2 years since the last time that you were on the show. And it's just great to hear all the great things that you're doing. But most importantly, too, still seeing that spark and that passion, even though you've moved to a different grade level, but you're just still bringing that same heart to your students. And I think that is going to be wonderful for them and something so beneficial. So keep doing what you're doing, my friend. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for everything you share in your newsletter. And of course, that will be linked in the show notes too, as well. So, again, thank you as always, just for being an amazing person and an amazing guest and an amazing friend. Thank you so much.
Oh, Thank you. Thank you for everything you do for everyone, for the field of education. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much, my friend. And for all our audience members, thank you for joining us here for this wonderful episode. Please don't forget to visit our website at myedtech.live, myedtech.live, so you can check out this amazing episode and the other 303 wonderful episodes, I should say, where you can go ahead and find some knowledge nuggets that you can sprinkle onto what you are already doing great. And guys, if you haven't done so, jump over to your YouTube channel, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. We are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and it would be great to, just start the new year, 2025, with our 1,000 subscribers. That would be wonderful. And of course, for all our followers on social media, thank you as always for all of your support. To our sponsors this year who've made this show possible, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything that you do and in believing in our show and just helping us continue to bring you some amazing episodes and amazing conversations. So, thank you as always from the bottom of my heart. And my friends, until next time, don't forget, stay techie.